and his name was JB. Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, Jaybefaunt Leroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon. Come on in, have a seat, sit on down. Welcome. The Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms, so go ahead, subscribe there. Also part of Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can see me there on Sundays and Thursdays, as well as you can also catch me here every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So good to see all of you here today. If you guys have not already, you guys can also subscribe to my Substack at jaybefaunt.substack.com, so you guys are aware and alert of whenever I post email notifications for live streams, clips, or if I write any articles. So go ahead and go there as well. It's linked in the description down below. So good to see all of you here. Just want to give shouts out and hellos to everybody that's joining in the chat before we move forward. We're going to say hello to Jacqueline coming in saying, hi, everyone. Hey, Jebby. I'm making bloody sure I'm not missing this one. You better not make sure. Jacqueline, you better not make sure. You better be here and be square. All right. It's all copacetic here. All right. Terry Connolly coming in saying, peace, comrades. Good to see you. Terry Connolly coming in and the chat. So good to see you in here as well. Zoe coming in saying, woo, catch JB live. Yes, Zoe, you caught me. You gotta catch them all. Gotta catch them all. So good to see you in here. Roger coming in saying, Jacqueline, say hello to Jack. Showing some love to our Jacqueline here. Says Jacqueline Hemmings, what's the subject you find most appetizing? I hope it's me. I'm just kidding. Or maybe am I? I'm so silly. Anyway, good to see you as well. We have Soul Construct saying, hi, all. Good to see you here. Wow. Roger says, JB must be nice in Florida. New York got gray skies and snow. Dude, it's been great all day here too. My brother in Thor, my brother in Christ, my brother in Vishnu. It is great. Look, I'm telling you right now, it's been great all day. All day. I got to say it like a New Yorker. All day. But it's a nice respite from the heat. Because let me tell you something. It is like a dragon's balls out here. Once March comes, it is redonkulous. It is horrible. I can't even drink hot tea like I want. It's sad. Anywho, just to let you know, you're not the only one. You're not alone. Good to see you. All right. Yeah, Soul Construct. Wadi coming in saying, hey, everybody. Good to see you as well. Everybody that is watching in Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. Good to see all of you here. Now, we're going to have a few things we're going to be talking about today. It's going to be some very important subjects that I wanted to talk about. And I'm going to share with you guys what we're talking about today, and then we'll jump right into it because this is going to be a detailed stream. So, one of the things we're going to talk about, you need to own them. Interesting how I have Norfolk Southern train and a CSX train on the thumbnail. You need to own them. We're going to be talking about this. RWU proposes a bright idea. Let's get into it. We're also going to be talking about Black-owned banks. Are they the answer? This is going to be an interesting subject because I think a lot of people, especially in the Black community, a lot of us talk about things like this, but is it really the answer? Or is it not? We'll get into that. It's going to be a nuanced answer that I have, and I have my thoughts I'll be sharing on that. And then we're going to be talking about your pay may go down in Florida. What in the hell is going on in Tallahassee? We got to talk about it. So that's one of the things we're going to be starting off with first. Did you know that some cities in Florida have minimum wage laws as well? In Orlando, Florida, they have it by law that you have to follow the minimum wage law of the state. And so as of right now, as of September of last year, it has went up to $12 an hour. I know, sad, still $12 an hour. It's not as high as it should be, but we'll get into that. But in Tallahassee, that may change, giving corporations the ability to possibly undercut workers. So let's take a look. So I want to share with you guys this article, and shout out to Roger Meadows for sharing this with me, because if it weren't for him, this would have actually went underneath my nose. But thank you so very much for sharing this with me. This is out of Orlando Weekly. It says Florida Republicans cut public comment on bills that could affect wages of thousands of workers. The subheading says the proposal would in part erase local living wage laws in cities like Orlando, Tampa, and Miami. So let's get into it. It says the Republican chair of the Florida House Subcommittee decided on a whim to eliminate public testimony entirely on a bill that could affect the wages of thousands of workers across Florida. Florida Representative Tyler Cioris, chair of the House Regulatory Reform and Economic Development Subcommittee, said there was no time for legislators to hear comments from the public, surprising dozens of people who had signed up to speak on House Bill 433. If it's been a while since your high school civics class, a bit from Congress.gov, explainer of the American legislative process, how our laws are made, are worth revisiting. So this is what it says. It's perhaps the most important phase of the legislative process is the action by committees. The committees provide the most intensive consideration to a proposed measure, as well as the forum where the public is given their opportunity to be heard. So this is important because a lot of times, when you have cities, whether they be municipalities like cities or counties, they will have time for public comment. States also, legislators will also have time for public comment. So you can come in and state, what you want and what you don't want, and your views on potential laws that could be passed or ordinances that can be passed within the jurisdiction of that power, whether it be state or local, right? But this dipshit decided to make it so that no public comment can't be done. We don't want to hear from you, right? And make no mistake that, while I do particularly go after both parties because both parties are in cahoots with each other, in my opinion, this falls on the Republicans in the state. This falls on the GOP because it is the GOP that really wants something like this to pass. And it was the GOP member that actually halted comments for this proposed measure. Now, let's continue in this article. It says there's nothing about it. There's nothing in there about except when you don't feel like it. The bill, sponsored by Republican Representative Tiffany Esposito, would in part eliminate local living wage laws covering thousands of contracted workers in some of Florida's largest cities. By the way, just letting you guys know, when it comes to people, not just workers, but also immigrants, your mama, your daddy, your aunties, your uncles, everybody, right? So maybe even some of you that work for Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Grubhub, possibly. Could this affect you? Because this isn't limited to small businesses. Oh no, baby, this is big corporations that are also going to be affected by this. And so if you're a contract worker, this can definitely hurt you. Make no mistake. Let's continue. It says it will also prevent local governments from requiring employers to do things like provide water, shade, or other cooling measures for workers laboring outside. I want to read this again. Providing water, shade, or other cooling measures for workers laboring outside. God damn it, we are in Florida. Florida is the dick of the U.S. United States. Basically, I know y'all didn't look at it that way. I see it that way. Look, see, just share what my mind is at. But anyway, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But anyway, so look, here's the thing, right? Where that area is, that's one of the hottest parts of your body. Well, guess where one of the hardest parts of the United States is? Right here. We are in the crotch of the U.S. So it is hot here, right? Let's be real. And with that being said, it behooves anybody who is an employer to make sure that if your worker is working outside, and this also goes in accordance to people who work in the water parks as well as the theme parks, that their workers are constantly hydrated and constantly cooled because it is hot. Look. I can't look. I remember that part in Indiana Jones where the dude's face kind of melted off. I think it was when the Ark of the Covenant was open. I think in that one. I forget which one. Whatever. But his face was melting off. Take a plane here. Go ahead. As soon as you get off that jetway, as soon as you do, the heat, the humidity, it will hit you in your goddamn face. And when it does, you'll realize, you'll be like, well, it does exist. So I'm just letting you know that's how hot it is in here in Florida. And they don't want to provide water or ways to cool workers? These are some evil ass people. Let's continue. It says, in its broadest stroke, the bill would prohibit communities from establishing any kind of law affecting the terms and conditions of employment. Presumably, that would include things like work hours, job benefits, and paid leave. But Esposito declined to expand on her understanding of what that would encompass when questioned, because she don't know, right? So, Sirius told the public that he would read out every person's name, their organization, if applicable, and the position on the legislation. But unfortunately, our time will not allow for speakers to present to us. The Republican lawmaker then spent the next 7 minutes reading off the name. Oh, about time. And then you spend 7 minutes to read off all the speakers' names. Good God. The Republican lawmaker then spent the next 7 minutes reading off the names of each person who had signed up to either speak or waive their position. Jackson Oberlink, lobbyist for Florida Rising, a left-leaning social advocacy group, described the process to Orlando Weekly as a sham and that was built and designed for corporate interests. Bingo! Bingo! It is designed for corporate interests. Let me tell you something. Hell, it's so hot here. Even this coffee is hot. But look, guess what? My solidarity is stronger than me being able to stand this heat. So JB is gonna have to go through it. I'm just gonna have to get through this heat. But anyways, here's the thing about this. This is for corporate interests. Look at who the legislator is dominated by. The House and the Senate are dominated by Florida Republicans. Not to say that gives a pass to the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party is still dog doo-doo when it comes to this state. But at the same time, just letting you know how the dynamics are. And then on top of it, we have Sir Fascist himself, Ron DeSantis, little Ronnie, the ones that puts lifts in his shoes. Yes, that's right. Ron DeSantis is short, and he is ashamed of it. Look, if you're a short king, own it. Anyway, so Ron DeSantis, short king himself, little Napoleon, decides to basically, be all gung-ho about corporate interests, right? So because of him and his corporate interests and the corporate interests that involve the Republican Party, they want to do bills like this. And I'm going to get to what my suspicions are in a second, because I do have some suspicions as to why they're doing this. Not just because they're, Cappy's going to cap, but, there's my other suspicions as well. And that's going to involve actually what the people actually want, because who cares about what the people actually think? But here's the thing. That's what they do. Let's continue on, because I'm going to start rambling. All right. So it says, ahead of cutting off public comment on the bill, the committee has already extended the meeting by half an hour. So wait. You can cut off public comment because we don't have enough time, but then you extend it by a half an hour? I'm telling you, they don't give a whooping font about you. I'm trying to cuss. They don't give a whooping font about you. This just shows they can extend the time for the meeting, but when it comes to actually hearing from the constituents, the voters, they're like, oh, but we can't do that. Even though it will literally affect the very lives of the people who are working. Good golly, Miss Molly. These people are sick in the head. Let's continue. So here's the crazy part. It says the panel of lawmakers has spent considerable amount of time discussing the potential benefits and ramifications of legislation limiting the minors' access to social media and porn websites. And the remaining meeting time was run short. So they were talking about social media and adult websites. That's what they were spending their time on. Now, I'm not saying that that's not important. That's important. But when it comes to the wages of workers, their concrete material conditions, that takes less precedent. Excuse me? You see, the moral issue would be, what good is talking about social media if you can't afford rent? What good is talking about kids' access to the internet if they can't even afford to eat? Like, that is secondary compared to what is actually of utmost importance. And the public comment reflects that. But they don't want to hear it from the public because they know the public is against it. Dear God, these people. Oh, we need a revolution. Okay. It says Esposito, a freshman member of the Florida House elected in 2022, was given time to briefly explain her bill, which she framed as a measure that would protect good jobs and support businesses in such a way that would reduce the cost of living in cities where rent has skyrocketed in recent years. This is the point. Here's the thing. What good is it to lower the wages of workers when rent is going up? Because guess what, chicken butt? If we cannot afford our rent, what makes you think we'll be able to afford your small business? We won't be able to afford to go to your business. And in fact, if we can't afford to go to your small business, then guess what? Your business is going to close. That's exactly what's going to happen. And then guess who ends up working at Walmart? You. Yes, you, Mr. Business Owner. Because people, their wages are crap. And so then guess what? You lose your business, Walmart grows, and then you're stuck there working with me while getting EBT cards and SNAP benefits. Because you and I both don't get a living wage because your business closed and people who live around you do not have enough money to buy from your small business. Why? Because ultimately this is a boom for who? The big money interests. This is a boom for who? The capitalists. This is a big boom for the corporations. They love Florida. Oh, baby, they love Florida. They love it. You know, we don't have a state income tax here, right? This is one of the reasons why they come. They come here. No state income tax. No state income tax. That means more money in your pocket, right? But when it comes to actual workers, do they really care? No, 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 no. They don't want they don't want to hear your voice. They don't want public comment. They don't want that. What do they want? Oh, they want the job creators to succeed. When they say job creators, that's just code word for big business. And these big businesses don't give a crap about you. We'll get into more of that when we start talking about the banks. But that's what it is. So don't want to spend too much time on this article. This article is actually really good. It's kind of a lengthy article. But I also have some thoughts about this. So I have my notes here. So here's my issue. Not only is this anti-democratic what they're doing in Tallahassee, but it's also deeply dangerous, as this would increase the homeless population, increase the crime rates, and cause more death in this state. Oh God, they're doing this on. Anywho, hopefully you guys don't hear that. But people won't be able to afford food, medications, healthcare, and utilities if their pay is being undercut. Public comments on this are necessary and needed to gauge how we feel. This is a way to undercut the ballot initiative that we passed in 2020 to raise our state minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2026. While that's not necessarily a big deal, because we all know that it is not a huge thing to be paid $15 an hour in this state. Hell, Universal Orlando, they just raised their rates to $17 an hour, right? Here's the problem. You need to make at least $32 an hour in the state of Florida in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. But what's the biggest issue is the language after the achievement of $15 an hour. Let me share this with you guys, because the language after we achieve $15 an hour by 2026 is what's scary to corporations. Remember, this was a ballot initiative that we passed in 2020. We said, as the people, not the politicians, we said we wanted $15 an hour, right? Remember, this is a red state, right? Led by Governor Ron DeSantis. And we said, $15 an hour or more. So here's the language that freaks out the corporations. Let me share this with you guys. Yeah. So let me enlarge this so you guys can see. Okay, so it says effective September 30th, 2023, the Florida minimum wage will be $12 an hour. We already established that, right? It says on November 3rd, 2020, Florida voters approved the constitutional amendment to gradually increase the state's minimum wage each year until reaching $15 per hour in September of 2026. On September 30th of 2023, which is last year, Florida's minimum wage will increase to $12 per hour. Each year thereafter, Florida's minimum wage will increase by $1 until the minimum wage reaches $15 per hour on September 30th of 2026. Here's the part that scares them. Resuming 2020 in 2027, The minimum wage will be adjusted annually for inflation. That's the part that's scary. Because if you're just paying $15 an hour, they can drag that out. That's fine. Because guess what? As cost of living goes up, if it sticks to $15, it's not really going to mean much, right? But that little piece, adjusting for inflation, that's like, oh no, oh, we can't have that, right? The workers are like, all right, yeah, all right, adjusted for inflation, baby, let's go, right? Now, that could be open to interpretation for what adjustments can be, but that's the point that I think a lot of businesses are really looking at. They're like, wait, adjusted for inflation, what does that mean for us, right? So this could be bad for corporations, but great for workers because the minimum wage is adjusted for inflation could mean a living wage for us in the state. So to get around that, it seems that the Republicans in the state are trying to undercut laws set by municipalities to allow corporations and employers to lowball workers legally. This is why workers coming together is so important. Worker co-ops and unions can be a fail-safe for issues like this. Also, ballot initiatives for things like this to prevent lawmakers from undercutting workers can also be a benefit. This story is important so that you can keep an eye on your state legislator and what also may be on the ballot in November. Now, look, I'm not talking about a candidate. I'm talking about ballot initiatives. Look, in 2020, we passed the $15 an hour minimum wage, which of course goes up gradually, but that piece that says, and then be adjusted annually for inflation, we did that. Not the politicians. We did that. The people. Right? In 2018, remember what we did? We passed a ballot initiative that gave the rights of voting back to formerly incarcerated people. We did that, not the politicians. But what did the politicians do? Both Democrat and Republicans. They put a paywall so that if you were formerly incarcerated, now you got to pay all this money back to the state for being incarcerated before you can even vote. That's what they did. So pay attention to the ballot initiatives. If you don't vote for anybody, fine, cool, that's you. All right, cool. That's your right. But pay attention to the ballot initiatives that are going on in the state, because these are a direct way that you can go around the politicians, that you can go around the political parties and actually do something that the people really want. See, here's the thing. They don't really like ballot initiatives because this means that this gives power to the people directly. This is direct democracy. This is what the Democrats and the Republicans don't like. So this is why it's important to pay attention to what they're going to be doing in November. What's going to be on the ballot? This is why it's important. Channels like, for instance, Savvy Sabs, she talks about what's going to be upcoming in the ballot. When she gets to Florida, those of you who are Floridians, pay attention. Those of you in Wisconsin, pay attention. Those of you in Michigan, pay attention. California, pay attention. All of you and throughout the entire United States. I don't care if it's Hawaii, Georgia, Washington State, Wisconsin. I don't care. Pay attention. Keep an eye on those, because we have to watch how they move. So, did you guys like the stream? Go ahead and give the stream a like. This pushes me out into the algorithm. Thank you so very much. And it's good to see all of you here. Let's go into the chat and let's get you guys' comments on this. All right. Let me see. All right. Let me see. Man, you guys are really conversing here. I almost said conversating. Jacqueline says, why do these politicians not care about any of the unhoused or the fact that there are so many unhoused? Surely it doesn't look good for the politicians in charge. It doesn't, but here's one of the biggest issues that I think a lot of people don't really consider. Homeless people are there as a sign. They're there as a way to maintain control. Hear me out. There was a video, man, I wish I had that video. There was a video of this dog, and they put this, I think it was a ball in front of his face, and the dog tried to grab it, right? And then they took like a puppet dragon, right? This puppet. And then they made it look like the dragon was trying to grab the ball, just like the dog. And then they put the ball back over the dog's face, and the dog just was like. Think about when it comes to homeless people like that. Homeless people are to serve as an example. If you do not work for starvation wages, how we tell you, this is what the corporations say, how we tell you, you're going to end up just like those people who are sleeping in tents on the street or sleeping in boxes. So take the starvation wages or end up like them. It's a hostage situation where they shoot one of the victims and then say, if you don't do what we say, you'll end up just like them. That's what this is. So then politicians are like, well, if you guys don't want to end up like them, then just do what the corporations say. That's basically what it is. Politicians are in on it. But thank you so very much. Great point, Jacqueline. Mizu says, yeah, but if you're in an apartment, you're making someone else rich, JB. If you're in an apartment. Yeah, but a lot of us don't have the means to be able to afford a home. So we have no choice. We have no choice but to live in an apartment. That's the way it is. There's nothing else that we have. No, I'm not. But yeah. Thank you so much. Let me see. Cobra Commander says, I make just enough to eat every day. That's a lot of us, man. And that's not the way it should be, but that's the way it is. Robinson says, well, some corporations like ballot initiatives, example, gig driver companies in California trying to pull the wool over voters' eyes in non-presidential election years. That's also very true. That's also very true. So this is why it's important to examine the ballot initiatives and see exactly what they mean. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll use convoluted language in order to confuse you, to make you think that it's for your benefit, when in reality it's actually for your detriment. That's what they will do. And sometimes they'll put these innocuous sounding names or names that sound like they benefit the workers, when in reality they benefit only the corporations. So you also have to pay very close attention to these ballot initiatives as well. That's a very good point also, Robinson. And thank you so very much. And I stand corrected on that too. But thank you so very much for pointing that out as well. So be very careful. At the same time, you don't have to depend on a politician to do the right thing. You can depend on your research and knowledge and talking with others in order to be able to see what the actual ballot initiative is and how it can benefit you. And this is why independent media is important, because this is what we're here for now. So, yeah. Corporal Commander says the same reason they section off homeless population into a zone so the cops can lock them in with rampant crime in that zone. Just as, yeah, exactly. Thank you very much, Corporal Commander. KD Lewis, my brother, in the chat saying homelessness does make our leaders look bad. That's why they spend so much time propagandizing people into believing homelessness and poverty are signs of poor individual character. This is also a great point, because the thing is that it's also saying, well, if you're homeless, it's your own fault, when in reality, homelessness is not an individual failing. It is a systemic problem. And I said it before, and I'll say it again. It is not your fault that you're homeless. And people will look at me like I'm crazy for saying that. Like, wait, what? They're the ones who are homeless. No. It is not your fault. It's not your fault, the fact that you live in a system that puts profits over people. It's not your fault. It is not your fault that when it comes to healthcare, people are forced into self-medicating by uses of substances. It's not your fault where people will lay you off just so they can appeal to the fiduciary responsibility of shareholders. To shareholders, I should say. It is not your fault that these things happen. It's not your fault that these corporations don't pay a living wage. It is not your fault that you get stuck in a cycle of paying student loan debt, medical debt. It's not your fault. So don't let anybody tell you otherwise. People are like, well, you got to be responsible. We all are. We all work hard. That's no surprise. Oh, by the way, Katie, thanks for the kafia, bro. I love it. Let's continue on. Omar says corporate media is monkey crap. Oh, corporate media is monkey crap. Let's go independent media. Yeah, by the way, support independent media. Did you guys like the stream already? Please make sure to like the stream. Yep. And Omar says homelessness is just proof of how evil politicians and corporations are. Yes. Let's go to the rock. Let's go to the rock, baby. Rock. Steady. Steady rocking all night long. All right. Rock. Steady. Rocking till the break of dawn. You guys remember that song by the Whispers? Oh no. Wait, hold on. I think okay. All right. All right. Thank you so very much. Roger says, Jay, ratify an amendment using CBI process to give Floridians the ability to do veto referendums to repeal Florida laws passed by the state. Oh, yes. Giving us, the citizens, the power to repeal would be massive. And be able to veto. Oh, basically, if they pass something that's to us just wrong, giving us the power to veto it, oh, that would be beautiful. But it can be done through ballot initiatives. All right. So, what are we going to be talking about next? So, we're going to be talking about Black-owned banks. Is that the answer? I have a lot of notes on this one, so we're going to get ready. Banks. When I say that word, how does that make you feel? Is it a positive feeling? Neutral? Is it negative and visceral? In our modern society, when it comes to providing products and services and commerce, banks are an essential part of our society to store our money, get loans and investments. This is just as an important part within the Black community. When it comes to FDIC insured banks, only 1% are Black owned, even though we make up 13% of the population. Are Black owned banks the answer to our wealth disparity as a community? Is it just access to banking that we need to assist us with improving the community? Let's take a look. So let me share this with you guys. And shout out again to Roger Meadows for this one. Let me share this article and then we'll get into this video, because I want to break this video down, because I think this is also going to be very important to break down, because especially when it comes to when people talk about Black owned, like we need to have more Black owned, support Black owned businesses, support Black owned banks. Let's see. So this is out of CNBC. It says less than 1% of all FDIC insured banks are Black owned, according to the FDIC. And so they're going to go over some key things, right? And it says big banks and corporations like Yelp, Netflix, and Microsoft have announced major investments in Black-owned banks. So it says the number of Black-owned banks have dwindled immensely over the years. Between 1888 and 1934, there were 134 Black-owned banks to help the community. Today, there are only 20 Black-owned banks that qualify as minority depository institutions, according to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or FDIC. So we're going to go over all this in just a second. So what do you think? Do you, especially if you're Black in the chat, do you think that having a Black-owned bank is the... I should have put this as a poll in the comments. My apologies. I was thinking about it, but I was running late. But do you think having a Black-owned bank is the answer? Is one of the biggest answers? Let me know in the comments, okay? I'm going to share this video and we're going to break this down, because I have my thoughts on this, and then we're also going to go over some of the facts about banks. So this is a interesting...
Big banks.
So this is entitled "Why Microsoft is Investing in Black-Owned Banks." Now, I'm going to be honest with you. This already kind of gives me sus vibes, because Microsoft is investing. You know good and well that we don't trust big corporations like Microsoft. And I'm going to tell you why. But we'll get into this. Let me see. All right, let me enlarge this. All right.
Big banks and major corporations like Yelp, Netflix, and Microsoft announced major investments in Black-owned banks.
Well, Black banks have gained an additional $1.5 billion in lending power since the death of George Floyd, created by a $150 million increase in equity capital.
These banks...
First of all, they waited till the death of George Floyd to do this. Y'all didn't want to do it when it happened to Freddie Gray, Philando Castile. Y'all didn't want to do it. Y'all didn't want to do it with Oh my God, what was that guy that was beat to death in the early 90s? I'm forgetting his name. I think his last name was King. But anyways, y'all didn't want to invest. Y'all didn't want to invest in us 30, 40 years ago? Y'all waited till George Floyd? Rodney King. Yes, thank you, Jacqueline. Y'all didn't want to invest when Rodney King got beat? Interesting. Let's continue. I'm not even all the way in.
These banks attempt to help the so-called banking deserts, or typically minority neighborhoods where brick and mortar banks are far and few between.
In a perfect world, you wouldn't have the racial wealth gap, and so you wouldn't have the discrimination that created Black-owned banks in the first place.
So first of all, one of the things I want to say, and this is something I think that a lot of times people really don't consider. So here's the thing. In most Black neighborhoods, actually, let me enlarge myself really quick because, well, I don't have a producer, so it's all me. Let me rap with you for a second about Black neighborhoods. In most Black neighborhoods, we are working or working class or working poor, right? So what's the closest to us? Check cashing places and payday loan stores. Let's be real. That's what is in a Black neighborhood, right? A block from me, there are probably 5 or 6 check cashing places and payday loan stores. That's the way it is, right? This is where we cash our checks and get loans because we don't make enough to live on a daily basis, and we don't have the credit to be able to get a personal loan from a traditional bank. So this is where check cashing spots and payday loans come into play. Because so many of us are working class and working poor, you see these establishments more in our neighborhoods. So if you're in an area with less financial institutions, then more check cashing stores and payday lenders will be the closest thing. These payday lenders and check cashing stores charge fees for their services at a much higher rate than a bank would. These can be seen as a private tax on poorer communities, especially Black communities. So I'm going to get back to this video in a second, but let me share this with y'all. Because I think this is important. So this is from Brookings. So this is an analysis of financial institutions in Black majority communities. Black borrowers and depositors face considerable challenges in accessing banking services. So let me see. So here it says, majority Black and Latino or Hispanic communities have fewer options when it comes to financial services than majority white neighborhoods. In 2017, majority Black zip codes located in metropolitan areas with over 250,000 people had a median dollar deposit-based Herfindahl-Hirschman index of 4,584, while non-majority Black zip codes had a median HHI of 3,106. Where the higher scores indicates less competition. Similarly, majority Latino and Hispanic zip codes with median HHI of 3,580 compared to a median HHI of 3,157 in non-majority Latino or Hispanic zip codes. Access to a wider range of financial services can mean lower interest rates and higher savings rates as banks compete to attract a customer base. So, we just don't have banks as plentiful in our communities than in white neighborhoods. You're more harder pressed to find a bank in a Black neighborhood than you are to find in a white neighborhood. That's just the truth. So let's continue in this.
That created Black-owned banks in the first place.
People of color, African Americans, in this conversation, were historically barred from accessing financial goods and financial services.
Discrimination is still there, but it just looks differently. It's not as blatant. It's not just on face value, but there are other things like credit scores.
And the Black Bank really kind of emerged as a way of meeting some of those needs.
Black-owned banks are so critical when it comes to, supporting racial equity initiatives and the Black and African American community.
Black banks are far from thriving. Americans who identify solely as Black or African American make up 13.4% of the US population today, but less than 1% of all FDIC-insured banks are considered Black-owned.
Are Black banks struggling? Yes. The banks reflect the community in which they are in. So whatever the struggles are of the community, the banks have the same struggle because they're enmeshed in that community. They cannot change it unless the community itself has more wealth.
So why are Black-owned banks key to ending racial disparity in America? And what do they need to succeed?
Are they really the key, though? That's my question. Because what would the difference between Black-owned and white-owned banks really mean for the community overall? Let's continue. Would it be equitable? Let's continue.
The history of banking in America is riddled with incidences of systematic racism. Terms like redlining originate from banking practices that segregated populations of color by denying loans for housing. While the federal government eventually stepped in to resolve financial discrimination with legislation like the Fair Housing Act of 1968 and the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977, experts say that the banking industry still has a race problem.
The country has a race problem, one that is rooted in wealth and power, which are largely synonymous. Nowhere are decisions about who gains and controls wealth more concentrated than in the banking and finance sector.
We are not far away from the subprime crisis, where Wall Street went to target Black and brown communities with their worst loans. The people who were sold a subprime loan could have been eligible for a prime loan. The financial crisis wiped out about 53% of the wealth in the Black communities, and that's wealth that hasn't been recovered.
I think we still see problems that are inherently baked into how we decide who gets loans or baked into how we invest in community. Redlining is still there, greenlining is still there, because most of the regulations, having been one, is focused around the fiduciary duty and the stability of the bank, not how they act in the community.
So there's a couple things that I wanted to point out, and I had to make sure I stick to my notes, but here's the thing that I think a lot of people are not cognizant of, especially, it could be, there's some white people that probably don't really realize this part about Black communities, but when people say underserved, a lot of times it's Black communities. Now, yesterday was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, and a lot of people were talking about it. A lot of us were celebrating it. And a lot of us who are, especially on the left, we know who Dr. Martin Luther King was because he was one of us. He was a socialist. He was for Black, not just equality, but also Black equity. People were praising him for pushing racial justice, equity, and equality. Many Black people feel that, one way to help is through Black-owned banks. This is a part of the buy from Black-owned and will help us greatly. And here's the thing. I actually agree with that. I agree. Black-owned businesses and things like that are great because it actually keeps the dollar within our community and it circulates, thus helping us in an equitable way. Look at what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. This was back in 1921. It's called Black Wall Street. Many of you probably heard of it before, but it was Black owned. It was a thriving business area with Black owned banks, shops, and services until racist white people burned down the town and murdered a bunch of people based on a false accusation. Go ahead, look it up. This was repeated over and over and over in towns throughout the United States. You ever heard of Seneca Village in New York? Sure you have. You've probably been through Seneca Village many, many times, but it was torn down. It was an all-Black neighborhood, torn down and replaced with an area called Central Park. That was Seneca Village. Yeah. All-Black town, torn down. All-Black neighborhood, right? Or Rosewood. That was a town here in Florida. Destroyed. Ocoee, few miles from me in Florida, destroyed because Black people dared to try to vote. Many Black towns in this country are historic Black towns are underwater in this country. Literally underwater. They've been made into lakes. So some of those favorite lakes that you like to frequent, that you like to fish at, that you like to swim in, oh, there are Black towns that are underneath that water. Yeah. This is something that some people don't want you to learn because they think, oh my God, if white people hear about this, they're going to feel bad. No, we don't want you to feel bad. We want you to change things so that things like this won't happen again. That's what it is. Black people also have a never again. It's not just Jewish people that have a never again. We have a never again too. And yet people still go, well, that's in the past. Think about it. And so I think that's one of the things that we need to focus in on, right? But also there was something that this lady said that I also want to also focus in on. So let's hear what she has to say just a bit. I want you to hear what she says too.
Or baked into how we invest in community. Redlining is still there. Greenlining is still there. Because most of the regulations, having been one, is focused around the fiduciary duty and the stability of the bank, not how they act in the community.
Okay, so she said a word. She said fiduciary. What does fiduciary mean? Because a lot of times you'll hear people like me say that, and people are like, wait, what is that word? Now, let me share with you guys the definition of fiduciary, because this explains a lot, okay? All right, so this is from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is a government agency, and it gives you the definition of fiduciary. Let me enlarge this so you guys can see. Okay. So, what is fiduciary? A fiduciary is someone who manages money or property for someone else. When you're named a fiduciary and accept the role, you must, by law, manage the person's money and property for their benefit, not yours. This could even be a leasing manager or a property manager. That's a person that has a fiduciary responsibility to the owner of the property, right? CEOs, CFOs, COOs, so CEOs, Chief Executive Officer, CFO, Chief Financial Officer, COO, Chief Operations Officer, and many other executives and officers within a corporation also have a fiduciary responsibility to whom? That would be the shareholders, the people who own the shares, who own the means of production within a corporation. That's what it means, right? Banks, just as well, are no different in this regard, especially the corporate banks, because they are corporations. They have a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders. Just because you have a bank account, just because you got checking and savings in Bank of America, don't mean that you are a shareholder. You're not, All right. You're just an account holder. You don't mean diddly squat to them, right? You're not a shareholder. Shareholders are people who own the shares in places like Bank of America and Chase and JP Morgan. And some of the shareholders are even the CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and other different financial officers. Executives and officers within the board. So that's what it means. Okay. So that's what fiduciary means. And I want everybody to know that, because we're trying to be educational here as well. Okay. So when it comes to this, by this definition, executive officers within a corporation, including banks, have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, meaning they matter. It's their wealth. It's their money. It's their property that what's matter. You as a worker don't matter. So let's take a look at this. So when it comes to their fiduciary responsibility, let's examine this. And big shout out to Roger Meadows for this. I don't think he'd think I was going to pull this up, but this is from the Public Banking Institute. At a glance, they have this table. I encourage everybody to take a look at this. But so you have depositories. So a big bank is also a depository, right? Big global banks. So I want you guys to look at this. So ownership, right? Ownership of big global banks. These will be your JP Morgans. These would be your Regions. This would be your Bank of America, so on and so forth, PNC, whatever. It says the big global banks are owned by their shareholders. The largest shareholders of every mega bank include the behemoth asset management firms BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, while holding company Berkshire Hathaway. Remember that name, Berkshire Hathaway. We're going to be getting to that in the next segment. Berkshire Hathaway is the largest shareholder of two of the biggest U.S. banks. Yes, people. Yes. The biggest culprits are also people who own the banks. Now, as for charters, they hold charter. Yeah. Depository. Yes, they are depositories, right? Says the big global banks are depository banks, which means they can accept deposits, include deposits from government entities. For instance, here in Orange County, Orlando, you have Orange County government actually banks with Wells Fargo. So yes, Wells Fargo literally holds the money that our taxes that we pay in Orange County they hold that money. So if something happens to Wells Fargo, this county is screwed. Anywho, well, screwed up to $250,000. I'll just put it that way. Anyway, so let's go here. Profits. Says the profits of global banks benefit their globally based, what is that word? Shareholders. The largest shareholders of every mega bank include behemoth institutional investor management firms like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, while holding company Berkshire Hathaway is the largest shareholder of two of the largest U.S. biggest banks. So, loan public mandates. Big global banks don't have a local focus. They lend to global industries and for speculative purposes and derivatives, existing real estate, leverage buyouts. Non-productive lending leads to asset bubbles and crises. There are also biased lending in favor of the largest possible companies. The larger the bank, the lower the share of smaller loans in its business loan portfolio, and the higher the average loan sizes. So that's that. They can borrow from the Fed or other banks. No transparency, basically, because, well, why would they give transparency to people like you, right? Though they do have some transparency when it comes to, hang on, I might have to shrink this just a little bit. Okay. So global banks are required in all banks and savings loan associations to make quarterly standardized financial reports to the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council. So this data on types of loans made, assets, liabilities is used in monitoring in condition, performance, and risk profile and individual institutions in the industry as a whole. So you have that. Big global banks are managed by independent professionals, and then public input. There's no public input. So that's how these banks work, right? So when it comes to ownership, you don't own diddly squat, right? So I wanted to make sure that we make that abundantly clear. So when they talk about a fiduciary responsibility, it's never to the account holders. It's never to you, right? So you don't matter. So let's continue.
Accessibility is a big issue. Black neighborhoods have seen a disproportionate number of bank branch closures compared to white neighborhoods. Between 2010 and 2018, the number of banks in majority Black neighborhoods decreased by 14.6%. The disparity is even starker for major companies like JP Morgan and Bank of America. JP Morgan decreased its branches in majority Black areas by 22.8%, compared to a net decline of just 0.2% in the rest of the US. For Bank of America, it was 29.1%, compared to 18.4% in non-majority Black neighborhoods. In total, JP Morgan closed 55 branches, and Bank of America closed 95 branches in majority Black areas within the span of 8 years. When asked for comment, JP Morgan replied that as part of their $30 billion commitment to addressing racial equity, they've opened new branches in Black, Hispanic, and Latino neighborhoods and offer free financial health and home buying workshops. Bank of America said that 36% of its financial centers are now located in majority minority neighborhoods, with $1.25 billion invested in advancing racial equality and economic opportunity.
And none of us are above having to go to a local bank once in a while to make deposits, to take out cash.
In its void, oftentimes what we'll see is one of two things. Either we will see no availability to liquidity, that is, that there's no other place for people of color to actually access their money, or, and just as perversely, we'll see higher prices for that liquidity. That is, that we'll see higher interest rates, even in excess of say 20% or 30%, in order to actually access money.
Researchers have also shown that discrimination in loan denial and cost have not declined over the years, in spite of regulations that were designed to prevent them.
It is legal because of how we have defined risk tolerance, how interest rates are charged. It's legal for myself to be charged more than my white peer. And so I think that discrimination is still there, but it just looks differently. It's not as blatant. It's not just on face value, but there are other things like credit scores that people use, or geographic location, or asset value of your home.
The way that race has been used to provide subsidies for some communities and not other communities, and the way that discrimination works insidiously has affected so profoundly Black home ownership, which is much lower than white home ownership, Black wealth accumulation, which is 12 to 1, 10 to 1, regardless of income. And that is 100% on account of these racist credit policies and home ownership.
That's what.
So I just want to say also, remember, there was an article that came out, what was it, 2021, 2022? It was probably earlier than that. But how Black wealth actually tanked under Barack Obama. It was because he allowed these banks to continue. He didn't let them fail. And instead of actually giving money to the actual people who have mortgages, the actual people who own these homes, to homeowners, he gave the money straight to the banks. Now, the banks still would have gotten this money regardless, but instead he skipped and gave it straight to them. And then what did they do? They foreclosed on homes. And it especially happened in Black communities. And guess what? That Black wealth, it just tanked. So we're actually worse off now than we were back in 2008. Thanks to the first black president. Interesting, right? And this was from the big banks, really.
Of these racist credit policies and home ownership.
That's where Black-owned banks come in. Banks and credit unions must be federally designated as a minority depository institution by the FDIC to qualify as being Black-owned. MDIs must either have 51% or more of their shares owned by minority individuals, or a majority of its board members are minorities, and the community that it serves is predominantly minority as well. As of 2021, there are 146 minority depository institutions in America. 20 of them qualify as being Black or African American owned.
It allows people to have a certification and legitimately, one, signal to the larger community they are there to help them. Two, really put some guardrails, because these institutions, particularly much like CDFIs, are designed to serve communities that have been historically overlooked and underserved. So I would say the benefit of that certification is giving visibility to those folks. And I think it's also kind of elevated the fact that institutions and certainly the federal government believes that MDIs have a vital role in society.
Besides its designation, Black-owned banks work very similarly to traditional banks. They provide mortgages, loans, and insured bank accounts. What does make them unique is their mission to bring equality to banking, providing affordable financial services and education to people that need it the most.
When a bank has a branch in a community, people are more likely to get access to financial institutions, and Black banks, Black credit unions are more likely to locate in Black communities.
From a business decision, I completely understand if you follow the negative data that exists about us, why would a bank come? But obviously, that's when the presence of Black banks realized, no, I don't believe everything I read. And I see that there's massive home ownership from, prior grandparents. I see that people are going to work every day.
Black-owned banks.
That's also true, because a lot of our grandparents had home ownership, but because the prices of housing has went up exponentially, a lot of us who are younger generations, we can't even afford our own homes. I'll be 40 this year, and I can't afford a home. I would never be able to afford a home. 40. I'll be 40. Oh, God. Actually, nah, because I look damn good. Anyway, I'll be almost 40 this year. I will be 40 this year, and I can't afford a home. My mother is in her 70s, and she's never owned her own home. She's a baby boomer. My grandmother lost her home. Somebody took it right from under her. So when it comes to wealth within even my own family, non-existent. It's not there. So what are we to do? Right? And then when it comes to things like, well, you have to establish credit. Well, we can talk about that, but the whole credit system is racist. And watch some people who are, cappies are going to go, well, no, it's not racist. You just have to be responsible. No, it's racist, and we'll get into that in a second. But yeah. Let's go.
Also support the economic life of the communities they serve by providing much-needed loans for small businesses, nonprofits, and Black homebuyers.
We found that in the aftermath of the Great Recession, that Black banks on average actually expanded their mortgage credit access at a time in which arguably many financial institutions were actually fleeing the lending space. But I think the second part is, we're beginning to hear anecdotes encouragingly that Black banks are beginning to look to develop what are called special purpose credit facilities. These types of facilities will give more flexibility to all institutions, but including Black banks, that will allow them to provide credit to people who have been demonstrated to have been historically disadvantaged, or communities that have been historically disadvantaged.
The number of Black-owned banks.
So let's talk about credit for a second, because I think a lot of times people are right. Well, they just need more access to credit. They just need more access to credit. That's all they can, so they can borrow. This whole credit system is racist. Let me tell you. We'll get back to the video in a second, but let me share something with y'all. People are like, why are you talking about race? Because it is linked to class. So let's go into it. Let me share this. So this is a great article. It says why credit scores are racist. Smack you right in the face. It says credit scores reflect economic racism and perpetuate it too. All right. So it says this system is supposed to be neutral, fact-based way to decide whether to approve a loan application. But the U.S.'s history of economic racism puts BIPOC or Black and brown people at a disadvantage in credit score calculations, codifying discrimination into data and producing more discrimination as a result. Rather than leveling the playing field, credit score serves as gatekeepers to wealth building for communities already facing the highest barriers. Despite creating inequity, the system is still an improvement on what came before. Prior to the 1974 Equal Credit Opportunity Act, ECOA, overwhelmingly white male bankers had total discretion over business loan approvals and regularly denied Black and brown applicants based solely on their race. The passage of the ECOA mandated that banks use credit history, not any part of an applicant's identity, in deciding whether to approve a loan. Credit reporting agencies began calculating number scores in 1989 using a formula created in 1959 by two white men that's known as FICO. So, just to let you guys know, I'm older than the FICO score. You're welcome. All right, so let's continue this. It says, but the financial activity that credit agencies use in scoring, which is mortgages, student loans, car loans, and credit cards, is inherently biased against Black and brown borrowers because it's based on financial instruments that economic racism has kept out of reach of racialized communities for decades. For most of the 20th century, redlining kept applicants of color, particularly Black folks, from getting mortgages and building wealth through home equity. Although it was officially outlawed in the 1968 Fair Housing Act, it continued informally, more recent, in the form of subprime lending, which happened in 2008. Remember, we had that subprime mortgage crisis. As a result of this history and many other factors, the Black home ownership rate is just 44% compared to 74% for non-Latine white people. So, employment discrimination has also kept the communities economically precarious. Even today, about half of Black Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Since the majority of credit score calculations are based on payment history and credit use, unstable income can quickly tank a credit score. Auto loans, too, disproportionately impact Black folks' credit scores because many dealers charge them more for cars and place higher interest rates on their accounts. So, because of their discrimination, what ends up happening? Well, we get charged more, even though we may be on par economically with somebody who's white. We'll get higher APR. We'll get, our loans may not be as high. All because of this. They will judge us by this. And so it makes it harder for us to pay things off. Hell, look, how many of you who are Black that are homeowners who try to get a property appraisal were appraised your property, and this has been recorded in the news, as lower value, but then they switched all the pictures and made it look like it was a white household and had one of their white friends represent as the homeowner, and then they appraise it for like 50% higher than what it actually is. Hell, remember what I talked about a couple weeks back? About how Navy Federal Credit Union was approving less they were approving less mortgages for black borrowers than they were for white borrowers. It exists, man. It keeps going. It's not stopping. It says notably, most credit scoring agencies don't factor in payments for phone bills, utilities, or rent, which are broadly used across under-resourced communities and good indicators of whether a borrower can consistently pay their bills. Here's the thing. I'm going to tell y'all something right now. If my credit score was based on how consistently I paid my rent on time, my credit score would be high. High. Yeah, I can barely eat. Yeah, I can barely get to place, but I damn sure make sure that rent is paid on time because I got to live. But it doesn't reflect on my credit score. So when it comes to me wanting to get a loan for something, maybe I want to start a small business, right? Maybe I want to start something that will actually make me more of a productive member of society. But I can't access that credit because I don't have a home. I don't own a home. One was never given to me that has equity. I've never had the capital to be able to buy one. I don't own things like that. So therefore, what do? Right? Because I'm a renter, just like many of you are. Let's continue. The data used in current credit scoring models are not neutral. It is a mirror of inequalities from the past. By using this data, we're amplifying those inequalities today. It has striking effect on people's life chances. Unsurprisingly, racist data leads to racist outcomes. A 2015 report from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found that poor, Black, and Latina people were far more likely to either have no credit history or so little that they could not get a credit score. This happened to me. I didn't really establish my credit until I was over 30. That's how old I was. I didn't establish it when I was 18, like a lot of people. I didn't get my first credit card until after 30. By the way, I don't use credit cards no more because, well, that's a scam. And plus, the APR was like 26%, which me not knowing, things, they were raking me over the coals. I would tell myself not to even get a credit card anymore. But anyways, it says, according to the research from the Urban Institute, a majority of Black communities and majority Indigenous communities have the lowest median credit scores. Residents of reservations have credit scores averaging 30 points lower than those in surrounding areas. It says, because personal credit scores are taken into account for both business loans, having a low score is a major barrier to securing capital needed to start a new venture or grow an existing one. The ideal loan for small businesses is a government-backed loan called an SBA 7A. It has a long repayment period and low interest rates. But to qualify for this loan, applicants usually need a credit score of at least 680. The same goes for private bank loans with favorable terms. So here's the problem. Even if somebody like me went to a private big bank, I still wouldn't be able to get a loan because I'm a renter and my credit is trash. Even though I'm reliable when it comes to paying back my rent, when it comes to paying on my light bill, right? When it comes to my phone bill, I damn sure make that's paid and I'm reliable on it, but it doesn't get necessarily reflected in your credit score. So guess what? My credit is trash. Also, I also don't have student loans because I never went to college. Why didn't I go to college? Because it's too damn expensive. And I didn't want to get student loan debt like my mother did. All right. It says loans for people with low credit scores come at much higher interest rates that add hundreds or thousands of dollars in payments over the lifetime of the loan. Under 600, the only options for most people are cash advance loans or payday loans, which come with highest interest rates, sometimes above 50%. So, just as economic racism positioned Black and brown people to have lower credit scores, it now puts them at higher risk for expensive, sometimes predatory lending. I'm going to tell you guys right now, this actually happened to my mama. Because one time she had to go to a payday lender, and it was well over 100% interest. It was just like, it's crazy high. Like, you borrow 50, they want like $500 back. It's crazy. And so guess what? This is how they operate. And it's predatory because these companies make most of their money off of us. They don't make their money off of rich people. They make their money off of us. That's how they get so rich. Go ahead. How many Amscots are in the country? And I'll end it with this. It says credit scores ultimately are a shortcut to that claim to be fair, but don't seek true equality. They use data with racist history to guess whether a person will repay a loan instead of getting to know that person and supporting them to ensure their financial success. So that is basically why credit scores are racist. I'll put that in the chat. All right, so let's go back to this.
Banks has dwindled immensely over the years.
Are Black banks struggling? Yes. The banks reflect the community in which they are in. So whatever the struggles are of the community, the banks have the same struggle because they're enmeshed in that community. They cannot change it unless the community itself has more wealth and has more access, and we have less discrimination as a society.
Between 1888 and 1934, there were 134 Black-owned banks to help the Black community. Today, there are only 20 Black-owned banks that qualify as minority depository institutions. While people who identify as solely Black or African American make up 13.4% of the U.S. population, Black-owned banks consist of less than 1% of all FDIC-insured banks in the United States.
I think part of it has to do with the broader trend in the banking community. That is that overall, we're seeing the number of banks overall declining and assets being concentrated, particularly in your larger global and more complex financial institutions.
Black-owned banks still lack the assets needed to compete against major players. One United Bank manages over $650 million in assets as the biggest Black-owned bank in America. In comparison, JP Morgan and Bank of America each manage asset portfolios that are worth well over $2 trillion.
So the size of assets really determines what they're able to do from a lending and an investment perspective, which then of course drives how innovative they can be. It talks about leads to margins in the bank and how many people can show up and what's the staffing look like and all of those kinds of things. And obviously it's a big regulatory marker that people look on the stability and health of the institution.
To combat these concerns, several big banks and corporations have invested heavily in Black-owned banks following the death of George Floyd. More recently, Microsoft and Truist Financial backed FDIC's new fund to invest in minority-owned banks, each putting in tens of millions of dollars to help its launch.
With Microsoft impact investments, we always evaluate investments on impact first, then risk, then return. So really the driver here is what impact can we drive? The FDIC and Truist have been, critical partners in driving this forward for mission-driven bank.
Most experts remain cautiously optimistic about the recent investments made to Black-owned banks, but agree that there's still work to be done.
I think every corporation needs to look inside their own practices and see where they can themselves remedy some of the historic wrongs that they have done. And so it is great news when I hear about big banks and big corporations saying we're going to donate into Black-owned banks.
I'm not going to finish this entire thing, but let me just what she just said there. Let's talk about this, because I think this is an important conversation, because here's my thoughts, and then I want to get your thoughts. While they offer some benefits to the Black community, I'm not going to say Black-owned banks would be bad for the community. I think they would offer some benefits, because, of course, if you have a Black-owned bank, let's say it's a local bank in the community, then it's going to look for ways to offer, lines of credit to people within the community. It's going to give people in the community depositories, people who, need checking and savings accounts. It's going to offer it to them so that you're not always going to that check cashing place and them having to charge you in order to cash your check. In fact, you'll be able to go to those banks and you'll be able to keep more of your money because you're using that bank instead. And so therefore, you won't have to pay a check cashing place any more money. You'll just be going straight to the bank, right? And on top of that, when it comes to if you need a loan, they may be more lax when it comes to their criteria for giving you a loan in that way, right? So, and they may say, well, I'm Black and you're Black. We're not going to discriminate, based on race and things like that. What they still might use credit scores and things like that, which is still inherently racist in my view. But the likelihood of being more discriminatory to you maybe a little bit less, right? Unfortunately, in my opinion, this may still go in the same direction of white-owned banks. Now, hear me out. Wealth creation in this system always goes straight to the top. The goal isn't to create more. The goal isn't to create more Byron Allens, Tyler Perrys, or Oprah Winfrey's. It should be to make sure that all Black people have their material conditions met, and that all Black people are able to live. But this idea that exists within the capitalist system, which operates to put money capital in the hands of individuals instead of the community. Now, I say banks had the fiduciary responsibility to shareholders of the bank, which will concentrate wealth to the top of the bank. Now, remember what I showed you? The owners of the bank, the shareholders, that's who they have a fiduciary responsibility to. This would not be any different to Black-owned banks. You would just have Black people at the top as the shareholders, right? However, community-based credit unions, which are owned by the members, which are account holders, and which may be Black-owned, will be a much better boon to helping the community. At least until we can get postal banking back. So let's take a look at credit unions and let's take a look at what they entail. So going back to this graph, right? So we already talked about big global banks, right? But what about credit unions? Now, big global banks are owned by their shareholders, right? We established that. Making sure, yeah, okay. But what are credit unions? It says credit unions are owned by their members. And who are the members of credit unions? Members of credit unions are account holders. That's it. So you got a checking and savings account, you're a member of a credit union, which means you have partial ownership of that financial institution. All right, let's continue. Now, depository says accepts deposits, which cash deposits, government entity, state law. Okay, profits. Credit unions are a not-for-profit companies. Any income generated is used to fund projects and services that will benefit the interests and members and the community. So that's what credit unions are, right? Now, loan purpose, public mandate, credit unions make loans to their members and local economy where they are located. Productive lending into local communities leads to sustainable growth and increase in GDP. Transparency, it says FDIC, federally insured credit unions, are required to file standardized financial reports to the NCUA regulatory agency. So NCUA is for credit unions, the FDIC is for banks, right? Independence, credit unions are managed by independent professionals, and then public input. Credit unions have member elected boards run by local members. So credit union, okay, I'll put it like this. Whereas where you work, so if you have a job, it's typically top down, right? You have the employer and employees. The employer owns the company. Employees just work there, and all the profits go to the people at the top, right? Same thing with big banks. You have the shareholders and the chief executive officers and the account holders. They don't really matter in that way. They don't get any profits, right? Whereas worker co-ops are owned by all the workers, and a worker co-op would be democratically ran by all the workers, and then all the profits would go to all the workers collectively. Credit union is owned by all the members, and the profits are used and stipulated by the members and what they want for the community. So when it comes to worker co-ops, credit unions are kind of like the financial institution version of that, right? It's not as black and white, but stay with me here. So it's better than a bank. So when it comes to black community, black worker co-ops, or a community credit union. See what I'm going? All right. So I see black-owned banks just as another way to introduce black capitalism. Fred Hampton said something about this. Let me share this with you guys. What did Fred Hampton say? Great website. It says, this is out of Hood Communist. Fred Hampton said, we say you don't fight racism with racism. We're going to fight racism with solidarity. We say you don't fight capitalism with black capitalism. You fight capitalism with socialism. Thing is see, we got a troll in chat. Anyway, so here's the thing, I think. Using a system that exploits to benefit the exploited by helping them to continue the cycle of exploitation doesn't sound right, right? No, we should be going into a different direction. A good start is black-owned, black-membered credit unions and black-owned cooperatives as a business to help us grow. And here's the thing. I encourage everyone to look into collective business models like credit unions and worker co-ops to help their communities to thrive instead of these top-down, owner-class dumpster fires that have ruined our lives. So, do I agree with black-owned? Yes. But it's the way we go about it. Because if you're a black billionaire, how did you get to that position? You got to exploit in order to get to that position. Black, white, doesn't matter. So that's the point. I hope that was a nuanced answer for you guys. So, did you guys like the stream? Go ahead and give the stream a like. All right. And we're going to go to the chat. But before I do that, just to give a shout out to all the patrons on Patreon and Coffee. But without you guys, I would not be able to do this work. And so I just want to give a big thank you to all of you for supporting the channel, because without you guys, I would not be able to do this. So thank you so very much. And if you guys would like to, the Patreon link is also in the description below. And if you guys would like to, you guys can become patrons on Patreon. And also, I would like to share with you guys the on Patreon so that you guys can see what you get. All right. So let me share this with you guys. So we have JB members, Solidarity, Comrade, Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, and Mega Jaybefaunters as well. So thank you so very much for that. Just as a reminder, my channel is demonetized. So if you guys would like to support the channel, you guys go to Patreon or PayPal, which is linked in the description down below. And thank you so much to all the new patrons, either now or in the future, for supporting the channel. So thank you. So let's go to the chat, because I know you guys got some things to say. So Paul Smith says Black banks will not work without Black community, and that has a massive amount of disposable income. That's also a really interesting point too. We ain't got the disposable income. We're living paycheck to paycheck. So where are we going to get it? You know? And then people say, like, well, they can give out loans with credit. And it's like, well, what's the APR? You know, what's the interest rates? Are they going to be able to give it to us? And then what criteria are they going to use in order to be able to gauge whether they can give us a loan or not? Because credit scores essentially are racist anyway. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? Are you going to do it like they did in the past, where you actually meet the person and see their financial life and then gauge it based on that? I would hope so. But thank you very much for that. KD Lewis says the Divine Nine, Black Greek fraternities and sororities, have their own credit unions. Those haven't done much for the actual community compared to the members of the orgs. Interesting. I also would like to see more community involvement from credit unions, at least until we can get postal banking again. Leroy says Black capitalism will never set us free. All forms of capitalism lead to oppression. I agree. Thank you very much for that as well. Luz says maybe community-owned banks is a better option, which in predominantly Black areas will be owned by those very constituents. Yeah, but the thing is that it doesn't. It would be still go to the top because it would be for the shareholders, right? It wouldn't be for the actual community members, because if you actually give the benefits back to the community members and if they make the decisions, then it would be a credit union essentially. And yeah, Mizu, I already answered that question. Why not just Black-owned credit unions? So yeah, let's go to the rest of the chat. Let me see. Let me see. Lou says in Germany, the post office has an in-house bank and is state-owned, or was just before I left. Oh, yeah, that's cool. We used to have postal banking here in the United States. Roger says post office banking was a thing from 1911, yes, to 1967. They allow you to take out loans, mortgages, student loans, small business, and auto loans at low interest, but high interest on savings. Pigletine, whoever you are, says, how about this? If you don't have the money, don't spend it. Well, we aren't. That's the problem. The thing is, we ain't got no money to spend. So therefore, this is why things are so hard the way they are. Cobra Commander said, Paul Robeson said it best, the successes of few Black artists and celebrities does not make up for the rest. Exactly. I agree. You know, it's funny. You know, it's funny with comments like this. It's always just live a miserly life. Live a miserable, miserly life until you can actually succeed. And the thing is like, okay, so you have no leisure. You can't enjoy yourself in life. And you have to suffer until you can actually make it in a system where it's not designed for everybody to make it. It's not designed for everybody to actually have the material conditions necessary. See, here, this is the type of mindset where it's like, well, it's your own fault that you're poor. It's your own fault that you're homeless. It's your own fault. It's your own fault. It's your own fault. And when people like this say this, here's one of the biggest issues. It's a system that creates this type of disparity. It's not just, well, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. No, we did what we were supposed to do. And yet, now look at us. And so the goalpost keeps getting moved, right? I'm a millennial. What did they tell us? They told us to go to college, you'll get a better life. How's that working out for us? Oh, you just have to come up with a great idea. Some of us come up with great ideas. But not everybody has a great idea. But we all work hard. Hell, homeless people work hard. Over 40% of people who are homeless actually have jobs. What do? Oh, they just didn't eat beans and rice enough. You must be new to my channel. Go ahead and keep hate watching. All right, so Mizu says, so by your standards, only rich people should start businesses. Great effing take. Yeah, it's like, it's crazy. All right, so everybody's clowning on. Let me see. Mizu says, I believe in not-for-profits versus non-profits, as the profits in the former is for paying a good wage and keeping the infrastructure up. Thank you very much. Let me see. Let me see. Okay, Lou says, I'm talking about municipal-owned banks. Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to municipal-owned banks, right? What you're talking about is a municipal-owned bank that is open to the public, that accepts, deposits and things like that from the public. I've actually talked about public banks, and municipal-owned banks, but from the perspective of them not being open to deposits from the public. The only deposits that they get are from the municipality. But that is an option. Municipal-owned banks that's an option there too. But thank you very much for that. Killier Grigor says, why are we here? Surely not to live in pain and fear. That's John Living. Life is for living, not slaving. Absolutely. I agree. Oh, it went up. Mizu says, JB, physically disabled can greatly contribute, and we don't build the tools in for this. Communism, especially guilty of this. They want everyone to contribute, but don't have that infrastructure. I mean, I'm disabled. And communism is really just workers owning the means of production throughout, and also workers determining how the government operates. But we can always have that argument later. Katie says, capitalist apologists believe you have to earn peace and comfortability in your life. Pretty sick way of thinking, considering all the rich people who were born into privileged, comfortable lives. Yeah, you already got it. Let me see. Yep, let's go to the rock bin. The rock bin. Let's go to the rock bin. All right, so. Oh boy, Roger got some things to say. He says, Black people need to stop inviting these foxes into our henhouse. Stop begging for these predatory lending institutions, Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo, Citibank, and others from coming in and leeching off of our energy. I agree. They are not helping. They are predatory in nature, and it's time we chop them down to size and put them out of business. Keep these institutions out of our community. If you want to build financials, might push for a public bank in your area, in your state and municipality, and they are more than well equipped to be a local Black community-owned banks and credit union replacement insurer. Allowing to insure more than the FDIC maximum of $250,000, as well as the state's or municipalities' assets. If you want even more equity, push for postal banking at the federal level. I agree. So while the public bank main directive is to finance infrastructure, but on the back end, it ensures local banks and credit union. While the postal banks can offer free checking and cashing and put predatory check cashing spots out of business, but only if they're made 24/7 together with Black community-owned banks and credit unions. We take out the mortgage, student, auto, and small business loans, CDs, and mutual funds, savings, and checking accounts. Make sure to put those links I sent you in the chats for everyone. Oh, okay. Put links in the chats. I didn't see any links. I'm sorry, I didn't see any links in the chats, Roger. At least not here. But let me put this also in the chat. So you guys can also have that. All right. Let me see, and then I'll get to my primary story. Oh, okay. I got you, Roger. Let me see. Wait, what? Breaking. Dow Jones closes more than 200 points lower on Tuesday after 10-year Treasury period yield tops 4%. Uh-oh. Rich people aren't happy today. What do I care? They exploit us anyway. So, all right. So let's get to the primary story for today. This is going to be interesting. I can't wait to get into this. Boom. You need to own them. You don't own me. Oh, goodness. Remember First Wives Club? That was a good movie. Let's talk about ownership, shall we? This guy in the chat, he's going to really hate me now. So, the Rail Workers Union had a really great idea. So, let's talk about it. In 2023, a small town of East Palestine, Ohio, endured an environmental tragedy when the Norfolk Southern freight train derailed with tons of harsh chemicals. Chemicals like vinyl chloride that were on board. Almost a year later, and the residents and the surrounding environment of this town are still suffering. Many rail workers have seen what has transpired and are now reaching the conclusions of what many of us on the left have arrived at. Public ownership is needed. I want to give a shout out to Dana Fairbanks on Twitter for sharing this article with me. I'm going to share this with you guys because this is important. All right. Let's go. Oh. All right. So let me share my screen. All right, so this is public ownership of rail. It's on the agenda. Here's what it could look like. Let's go to, hang on, trying to look at my notes here. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So under the consequences of private ownership, it says rail worker unions video lists some of the antisocial consequences of private rail ownership, problems for communities, issues for the community, and of course, rail disasters like we saw in East Palestine. As the film puts it, some industries are just too important to be kept in private hands. Can you list some of the consequences that follow from private ownership of rail? Make sure that's large enough. Maddox Thomas says, safety is on a lot of people's minds now, post-peace Palestine. The number of rail accidents per millions of miles traveled has been trending down over the large time scale of the past 50 years, in part because we don't have as many trains or as many train lines running. But since 2013, we've gone from 2.4 rail accidents per million miles for Class 1 railroad to just over 3 accidents per million miles. That's almost 30% increase in the accident rate. So here you see what happened in train derailment. Says that can largely be traced to the advent of precision scheduled railroading, which is neither precise nor scheduled nor really railroading, as the people like to joke. The focus is on similar trains at all. The focus is on longer trains at all costs and cutting crews, cutting maintenance. Union Pacific recently announced furloughs of 1,350 maintenance workers, saying that for financial reasons, they are moving all their maintenance to 2024. That's something you don't want to hear when rail line goes through your community. It says the role of precision scheduled railroading is really evident when you look at the accident rate. Norfolk Southern has gone from 2 to 4.5 accidents per million miles between 2013 and 2022. The rates for CSX and Union Pacific has also risen. BNSF is the only rail operator not to adopt PSR, precision scheduled railroading, didn't see the same increase. They have around 2.25 accidents fairly consistently for the past decade. So there's a clear change in railroading that has led to the decrease of safety. There's also the issue of service and how workers are being treated. The idea of the railroad as a good job is fading as the treatment of rail workers has gotten worse and worse. The Federal Railroad Administration conducted a study of fatigue which has found that nearly 40% of locomotive engineers and conductors are highly fatigued, and almost 90% of engineers and conductors reported that is the irregular work hours that contribute to fatigue. You can receive a call at any time in the night and be told that you have 2 hours to get on the train. That's disastrous for somebody's ability to see their family and to have a life outside of work. So, if you look at it, how they treat their workers are being treated like crap. Now, I just want to point something out. Did you know that there's only 4 major railroad corporations in the United States? There's 2 on the east side, 2 on the west side. Now, you have Norfolk Southern, CSX, BNSF, and Union Pacific. Those are only 4. That's all. That's it. Pretty much an oligopoly. Now, what is an oligopoly? Let's take a look. We got to learn, folks. We got to learn. All right. So I'm going to show you with you guys what an oligopoly is. Let me share. Let me see. Okay. So I wish I had this producer. Anywho, here's an oligopoly. Oligopoly. Gosh, I can't talk today. So it says not to be confused with oligarchy, a form of government where few people control a country. An oligopoly, right, meaning few and to sell, is a market in which control over an industry lies in the hands of a few large sellers who own a dominant share of the market. Oligopolistic markets have homogeneous products, few market participants, and an inelastic demand for products in those industries. As a result of their significant market power, firms of oligopolistic markets can influence prices through manipulating the supply function. Firms in an oligopoly are also mutually interdependent, as any action by one firm is expected to affect other firms in the market and evoke a reaction or consequential action. As a result, firms in oligopolistic markets often resort to collusion as a means of maximizing profits. So, here we go. When it comes to oligopolies, you can think of companies like utility companies. Like here in Florida, we have Florida FP&L, which is Florida Power and Light, or Duke Energy. You have internet service providers like AT&T, Comcast, and Spectrum. You have cable and TV satellite companies like Comcast, Spectrum, DirecTV, which is owned by AT&T, and Dish Network. Then you have cell phone providers like Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T. So they're just a small group of them, but they work off of each other. So when one says, oh, we're going to raise our prices a little, everybody's like, oh, well, that's market forces. We have to raise our prices too. This is exactly how they work. That's an oligopoly. And they keep a majority of the market share between them. They don't really allow for any other players to come in, or if players do come in, they are very tiny portion. Right? So let's take a look at what rail workers proposed. So let me share this as well. They make their case for public ownership of the railroad. I've been working on the railroad all the live long day. All right. So let me share this with you guys. Shout out to the Rail Workers Union for this one. This video is entitled Putting America back on track. The case for public rail ownership. So let's begin.
When I first ran down there, this is what I saw. Why is it that America's railroads just don't seem to work? This is a question we're asked quite a lot as railroaders. To explore it, I'm hitting the road to talk to people about the absurd way American life, our cities, roads, economy, commutes, and supply chain are defined for the worst by a few crappy companies that own our rail infrastructure. We'll start a national conversation about how things can be better, the need for something better. If we want a modern, growing, thriving transportation network just like our highways, we need to demand accountability, not share buybacks. We need to demand public ownership of the rails that our citizens rely on, that our economy relies on, that our nation relies on. I loved working for the railroad. I loved my job. I think I'm good at it too. I enjoy what I did. I was a 17-year railroad employee for Union Pacific as a locomotive engineer. I do love the railroad industry. I do not like the big Wall Street companies that we worked for. The railroad companies have become tools of Wall Street, of the big institutional investment firms that own them. And now they don't feel any obligation to their communities, any obligation to serve the public. Their only obligation that they feel that they have is to buy back more shares next quarter. They are unaccountable, and they believe that they can do whatever they want. I had been making content for a long time before this, and they hadn't said a thing. But when East Palestine came up and I started speaking about that, that is when they fired me, because they knew that this was a major issue that was going to roll down and trickle down to them. And they figured if they fired me that I would shut up. But they've been proven wrong on that. So I'm part of a growing movement, not of just railroaders, but of people and organizations that would like to see railroads brought into accountability. And we want to see public ownership of the railroad industry. Public ownership in rail is the idea that our physical infrastructure should be open access and competitive for freight rail companies while being accessible and welcoming for passenger rail. Many people assume that we own the railroads in America, but we don't. Although many railroads were built with public funds and land grants, today's railroads are nearly all owned and controlled by Wall Street firms that refuse to invest back into our ailing industry.
You can kind of think of this like highways. What if corporations own our highways? Scary thought, isn't it? Right? You got to jump on, let's say you got to jump on I-95. But the problem is, in order to jump on I-95, you got to be charged a fee. And then they only let certain types of people on the highways because, well, it's a private highway. You can only use it for certain things. That's part of capitalism, right? They would love to be able to own private highways. But yeah, interesting.
You see, publicly owned infrastructure is not a radical concept in America. We see examples of fully functional public access highways every single day as we drive. That's because most infrastructure in the United States is actually publicly owned and funded. Highways, ports, waterways, much of it just wouldn't exist if it had to show a profit every quarter. It's not perfect, but countless trucking companies compete on our open access highways, and it works. Public infrastructure like interstates just aren't subject to shareholders, stock buybacks, and dividends because they don't have to show a profit every quarter. We know their economic value, we know their value to society, and we know we'd be worse off without them. But it seems like the standard for a railroad in America is it profitable? Imagine what our highway system would look like if...
I'll get back to that in a second, but I find it very interesting how a lot of capitalists will talk about, well, capitalism breeds innovation, and yet, because highways weren't that profitable, if highways weren't profitable, then the capitalists wouldn't invest in it. They wouldn't build it. And it would take a whole lot of money to build. right? But because the government did, because the government ate that, right, that cost, it created an avenue for companies to expand on it, to use it. Reminds me of the internet. They don't want to talk about that.
If it was operated under the same profit-driven model. Welcome to your prime highway system. And for our winter users, remember that salted and plowed lanes only apply to our premium subscribers. And we are a private business after all, so you're definitely getting charged for additional baggage. Want that new bridge in your town? Well, your road hasn't been performing very well, so we're tearing it out. The shareholders have got to eat too. Let me give you a little lesson about how the railroad industry has changed over the last few years. We used to have the greatest railway system in the world. Speed, service, and innovation were how they grew the industry. After several decades of financial decline starting in the 60s, they regained their profitability, but have now lost any drive for growth or innovation. Unless it lines the pockets of Wall Street, they just don't do it. Instead, they've merged and consolidated until only a few large corporations control the entire rail network, blocking out competition, sabotaging passenger trains, and shutting down maintenance facilities.
If it does not produce immediate profits, it does not get invested in. That's essentially how capitalist corporations operate. There's no central planning model, so therefore, even if it's necessary, they're not going to do it. That's honestly how they operate. This is why government ownership is necessary.
Just since 2015, they've repurchased $165 billion of their own stock, often using borrowed funds, while their network shrinks and maintenance standards suffer. Why is rail, the most environmentally friendly mode of transportation, shrunk by a whopping 21% since 2006, while public highways have expanded and grown right along with our population and GDP? The answer lies in strategic cuts made by the rail giants, choosing to keep only the highest paying captive shippers and driving away the undesirable businesses to our subsidized public highway systems. Federal hearings were even held as pleas from businesses hurt by these practices harmed our economy, and poor rail service created a weaker supply chain and higher prices for us all. It's just capitalism, right? So what's the big deal? Well, not exactly. Not when a single industry has the power to cripple the economy, shut off communities, and cause inflation. Some industries are just too important to be held entirely in private hands.
So that point right there, this is one of the points that I want to bring up, because I think that a lot of people, especially people who say, well, capitalism breeds innovation. Well, here's my point. He said some industries are just too important to be held entirely in private hands. I've argued that they shouldn't be in private hands at all. Industries like rail, housing, education, healthcare, utilities, including water and internet, and public transportation. When you have an industry surrounding the need and necessity for life, but you make it for profit, that means somebody is going to die and their life will be damaged directly or indirectly from not having it freely accessible. Those industries are vital for modern life and should not be paywalled. We can pool our resources together and provide services to all, and it can be high quality. That's called living in society. Basically. And people who are like, oh my God, well, the taxes are going to be theft against us. And I'm like, well, what do taxes pay for? Now, I agree that some of our tax money, or federal dollars, as if you are into MMT, some of it is misused in ways in which we don't like. Like, for instance, I do not want all that money going to our defense department, really offense, and giving money to billions of dollars in Ukraine billions of dollars to Israel to bomb little brown children in other countries, and giving subsidies to all these big corporations. I don't like that. I want the money, that's our money, to actually go to actually helping people, like giving us healthcare, housing, education, food, clean water, clean air, and things like that. That's what I want our money to go towards. But do I consider taxes to be theft? No. Anywho, let's continue.
To see how these cost-cutting measures played out on the ground, we traveled to East Palestine to speak with the folks affected by the results of the disaster. Can you tell me what it was like that night?
I was inside, and I just heard sounded like brakes locking up on the train. Just an intense river of chemicals rolling down between the two tracks. The flame just kept coming closer and closer. I'm trying to get my wife out. She's in hysterics, trying to grab the animals. This is the most frantic state. I thought it was going to burn the place down. It was coming this way, and I figured my house is going to get caught up in it too. Everything's gone.
A Norfolk Southern train consisting of 150 rail cars derailed and crashed at 8:55 p.m. on February the 3rd.
Homes. And my second question is there anybody other than people who are paid by the railroad doing this chemical testing? Because I don't trust no one.
We're in a toxic town. It is just there. It's going to be there. It's going to be there forever. We matter. We are human and we matter.
So what have you lost in all this?
I own this house, paid it off. So proud. No one can take it from me. Well, guess what? They took it from me. They basically took it from me. It's worth nothing now. Everyone's around this area is getting sore throats, headaches, runny noses, not feeling well. My oldest daughter, she breathed in some of that. Suddenly 6 nosebleeds in one day. Right out.
So here's one of the things I want to bring out. Because you talked about his house basically being worthless. Nobody's going to buy a house in that town. Nobody would buy. So the generational wealth that he was accumulating for his family is gone, wiped out, because the environment is crap. Because of a corporation deciding to cut back on safety measures because of profits, right? Because that's how capitalist companies operate. They cut back on profits. They cut back on maintenance. They cut back on the workers. They make sure that the workers are strained. And so then guess what happens? Derailments go up. And it makes it more unsafe for these communities. And now you have communities like East Palestine, which are feeling the brunt of this, and Ohio. And just like what they did to Black communities by having interstates run through Black communities, and thus it affects our health, guess what? What did Black people say? If they did it to us, it's going to do it to you, right? East Palestine is majority white. They don't care about y'all. Just like they didn't care about us. And I think that's something that people need to recognize. These corporations will do whatever they can to maximize profit. Your health be damned. Heart goes out to this guy.
After all this, why did that happen? If this stuff isn't harmful, if it's not toxic. The smell has settled into everything. I've already gotten rid of all my furniture, my clothes, anything I had here from my granddaughter. Here's brand new Christmas toys, still in the box. I'm not gonna let her play with it. I don't know nothing about it. To just say, here, it's safe. Go ahead, honey, play with this. Put it in your mouth. To me, they took everything. They took everything. They owe me my life, and I want it back.
So I just have a question for anyone who can answer. What's the plan to stop this from happening again?
So do you think companies like Norfolk Southern should just be allowed to keep operating the way they do?
How long do you let anyone continue to do wrong and make mistakes before you hold them accountable?
But somebody in the chat just said, just eat rice and beans until you can save. Right? Just eat rice and beans? Is that what we do? Yes, that was shade I threw. That was shade.
If Norfolk and Southern can't keep people safe and run this rail, they shouldn't be running it.
One thing that we can all take out of the East Palestine disaster is that a national discussion needs to be had about the appropriate role of private rail infrastructure in America. Is it even appropriate anymore when these companies consider themselves to be too big to fail and could care less about your community's safety?
Let's talk about too big to fail. Because I have some things I want to say. And I'll get back to that video in a second. I said this before and I'll say it again. If a company is too big to fail, then it is too big to be private. It is too big to be for profit, and it needs to be publicly owned. I said what I said. When it comes to these rail companies, they should either be worker-owned or community-owned. Having it in private hands only leads to disaster like we seen last year. There's a trend that we see from the big four rail companies. Now, what are we going to do? We're going to follow the money. You guys want to follow the money with me? All right, let's go. Let's look at the owners, right? All right. Oh, boy. Here you guys go. Here JB goes with the ownership thing. What? It's important. All right. All right, let me share this. Because everybody's talking about. Ooh. Hang on. That. Oh. Sorry. I had this. I had the wrong one. Yep, here we go. So let's go into the owners. You guys know exactly where I'm going with this. So stick with me here. All right. So this is Norfolk Southern, right? This is the corporation. Let's look at the shareholders. Well, what do you know? Top one at the top is Vanguard. Right after that is BlackRock. Then you have JP Morgan. Then we have State Street. Remember what we said about fiduciary responsibilities? Are they to the people who live in the community? Are they to the workers? Absolutely not. They are to the what? Shareholders. Guess what? This is why your health and your lives are at risk, because they want to make more money to these companies. This is why. So that's who owns a huge amount of Norfolk Southern. Oh, are we done yet? Oh, no, we're not. Let's go. All right, let's go. Because we're not done. We're going to look at now Union Pacific. All right. Let's go and let's see who owns Union Pacific. trying to see something here. Let me show you something. Here's Union Pacific. And who owns them? Well, the top 10 owners of Union Pacific. Well, what do you know? Vanguard, BlackRock, SSGA Funds Management, Capital Research, Geode, Massachusetts Financial Services. Well, what do you know? The top two are Vanguard and BlackRock. Well, is this a running theme? Wow, these private equity corporations seem to be popping up. Seems to be the same ones. Well, and I try to look into BNSF, right? Because they are also a rail company. But they're owned by Berkshire Hathaway, which is also Warren Buffett's company. So they have that ownership, right? But then I said, who owns Berkshire Hathaway? Because I know you have people like Warren Buffett, that's one of the primary shareholders. But let's take a who else owns Berkshire Hathaway. So here's Berkshire Hathaway, owner of BNSF. Let's take a look. Well, Vanguard, BlackRock. Oh my goodness. There goes little Morgan Stanley down there. Little Morgan Stanley. There you go. It's the trend keeps trending. The math keeps mathing. And then we have CSX. Let's take a look at CSX and see who they're owned by. Because surely CSX has to be just a little bit different. Just a bit. Really? Well, let's take a look at CSX. CSX Corporation. Oh, man. Such a bummer. The same. The Vanguard, BlackRock, T. Rowe Price. So, by all intents and purposes, they're owned by these private equity firms, right? You notice a pattern here? This is why private equity should be banned from owning essential industries that are vital to life. Healthcare, housing, education, food, water, transportation. One of the best ways to ensure this is through citizen ballot initiatives. So you can go around the politicians and create laws ourselves so that industries like this won't fall into the hands of private equity that put our lives at risk. So I'm not going to watch the entire video, but I'll put the video in the chat so you guys can watch the rest. But they made the case. The Rail Workers Union, they said, nah, make it publicly owned. And this is why it is important that the people have a say over how these corporations operate. Look, the FDIC is a publicly owned corporation. Did you know that? It's Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Why? It's a government-owned and operated corporation that ensures that our money is safe and secure. So, what do we rely on? Do we rely on the United States Postal Service? That is a government corporation. So that's what I think. It should be publicly owned. Big entities like these railroads, no. They put people's lives at risk day in, day out. They do not deserve to be in private hands at all. And this is why, like I said before, keep an eye on those ballot initiatives in your state. All right. Because that could be the means where you can go around the politicians and have direct democracy. So, if you like the stream, go ahead and give the stream a like for some more of my deliciousness, because that's what you came for. My name is James, Mr. Fauntleroy. If you're nasty, let's go to the chat. I'm so stupid. Why do you guys watch this channel? All right, let's go to the Rockfin. All right, Rockfin, are you ready? Okay, so Roger says they already trying to own roads. Bipartisan infrastructure law sets the stage for privatization of transportation infrastructure called asset recycle. Interesting. So they're already doing it. Not surprised. Thanks for that, Roger. He says fiduciary means you gave your company to pimps. Sorry, shareholder. Fiduciary means you gave your company to pimps. Sorry, shareholders. Now get out on that track and make me my money. Ho, sorry, Zuckerberg. Said corporations are terrible, but get worse when they go public. Shareholders suppress innovation, and because innovation requires risk, which shareholders are adverse to. You know what? This is also a really good point, because shareholders are the people who own, companies like Universal, Viacom, and all these other entertainment companies. And this is one of the reasons why we keep having remakes and relaunches of the same old shows and movies day in and day out, because they don't actually want to take risks anymore. So they just want to bank on, remember this? We're doing this again. Like they're doing another Willy Wonka. Like, we don't need another Willy Wonka, right? The first Willy Wonka was fine. It was great. We had Gene Wilder. He was great. Perfect. We don't need a modern one. We don't need, we've done that story. Then they did another one with what's his face? Jack Sparrow. We didn't need another one, but they did. Right? Now they got Timothy Chalamet doing another one. Like, we don't need another one. We don't need another Willy Wonka. Why? But then, of course, they were like, we just want to do another Willy Wonka. Who gives a crap? Just show the old one to the kids. Digitally remaster it and show it to kids. Well, we got, dear God. But that's what they do, because they don't want to take new risks on new stories. But that's how it is, because shareholders are like, we don't want to make these risks. Thanks to Anna, says JB, wouldn't you consider taxes misappropriated against the public demand be considered theft? That's a good question. I would say misappropriated. Yes. That can be theft if it's misappropriated. But at the same time, it's like seeing it as a blanket statement that it's theft. No. Misappropriated is actually a more better term, and misappropriated in certain areas. Like, for instance, would you consider it theft if that tax is literally going to people like me who are disabled and get disability? Is that theft? Do you consider me as an accomplice to the theft because I'm disabled and I'm literally getting paid that money in order to survive? If you don't think so, then not all taxes are theft. Then there is misappropriation, but it depends on what. Because if you give me money to go to the store and to buy specific things, and I buy some of those specific things, but then I use some of it for means that you did not tell me to, then did I steal all of your money, or do I steal some of your money? So did I misappropriate some of the money that you gave me, or did I steal it all? So this is why I say it's not theft, but misappropriation is actually a better word. So when people say taxation, in certain ways is misappropriation, then I think yes. Roger continues. He says, cooperatize the enterprise like rail and cars and nationalize the infrastructure it runs over. Apply that to broadband. Rail cars are ISP, wires are tracks. Yes, I got you. Roger also says, someone tell that man about Ohio AG Attorney General power afforded to all state attorney generals to revoke corporate charters they can enact when corporations do this, maybe reissue outworking co-op charters. Government-owned, cooperatively operated, aka ran. And the mayor says, we watch because we love you. Aw. Now that's not theft, I agree. Okay, thank you so very much. Aw, Anna, thank you so much. Such a sweetheart. Such a sweetheart. All right, so let's go to the rest of the chat here. I know y'all got some things to say. Yep, you know it. You know it, Kill Your Egregores. They always. Cobra Commander says, but JB, monopolies are against the law. This is a way of going around them. See, yes, monopolies are against the law, but oligopolies are not. That's how they go around it, right? Cobra Commander says, anyone can invest and own a piece of our stock, guys who runs a monopoly. Charles K says, Vanguard is not private equity. If they're not private equity, then what are they? Mizu says we need to hold up Tesla for all future scientists as an example, especially to encourage them not to be amoral sociopaths. Jacqueline says, I've never heard of Vanguard or BlackRock or JP Morgan until I started watching the RBN channels. Yeah. Mizu says, Berkshire Hathaway bought one of the railroad companies when they were slumping. We do? Okay. Jenna says, but yeah, houses are being bought in East Palestine. Makes zero sense as to why or how they are, but are being bought and sold. Interesting. Electric vehicles are more harmful to the environment than gas-guzzling diesels. Look, I'm gonna tell you right now. I'm gonna take a whole different route. I say stop investing in personal vehicles altogether and let's start investing in public transportation, mass public transit. In fact, I think we should have mass public transportation free at the point of service, paid for through federal dollars. You can move a lot more people through mass public transit and more efficiently through mass public transit than you can through personal vehicles. Now, if you want to have personal vehicles, yeah, for people who especially out in rural areas, definitely, because internet went out for a second, but we're back. But in large municipalities, when it comes to public transportation, we should have more mass public transportation. And it should not be where, and the thing is, here in this country, we look down our noses at people who use public transportation, whereas it is across the board and across classes where people in Europe use public transportation. So I think we should invest more and more mass public transportation, especially high-speed rail. They do very well in places like China and Japan, where they have high-speed rail, where they use high-speed trains, maglev. Look, they have over 20,000 miles of high-speed rail in China. And don't tell me, oh, well, China is, a different size of the United States. No, China is roughly the same size as the United States, give or take a few square miles. So we can do that. If we can build roads through mountains and going around mountain ranges, oh, you bet your booty that we can actually build high-speed rail to go through mountains and go around them. We can do all that. But yeah. Thanks, Bryce. Thank you so much. Do I play video games? Once in a while, yeah. Aspen Fallen says DJ that Khaled demands another one. All right. Let me see. All right. Yes, Katie. More walkable cities? I actually agree. In fact, walkable cities would actually be great for our health. Not just physical health, but also mental health. Have you ever taken a walk and then just thought? Those actually help you, And it also creates more person-to-person interaction, which is also very healthy for us. And so, yes, if we have more walkable cities, that would be great too. And a lot of people who are like, oh my God, if we put this in government hands, I don't trust the government. This is why we need to take the government out of the hands of the corporations, because ultimately your problem isn't with government. Your problem is who owns the government. That's the problem. Everybody's like, oh my God, government's the problem. It's not government's the problem. Look, is an axe the problem when it's in the hands of somebody who wields it safely? Look, if I put the axe in the hands of an axe murderer, of course it's not going to be safe. Of course it's going to be damaging to people. But if you put an axe in the hands of somebody who utilizes it safely, is it really a problem? No. A hammer can be used to build, or a hammer can be used to destroy. Right now, you have a hammer, the government, in the hands of genocidal maniacs who want to only use that hammer for short-term profits and short-term gains. That's the problem. If you take that hammer out of the hands of the people who are using it to destroy, then guess what? And put it in the hands of people who want to build, then guess what, chicken butt? Then it can be used to build. Why did they communists use the hammer and sickle? Because it's workers using the government in order to build. To build who? The people, the workers. It's hammer and sickle is not weapons. They're tools to build. That's why. Oh gosh, that's one of the reasons why. Ilhan R says America actually invests in its people. Never going to happen because billionaires don't care. This is why we shouldn't have billionaires. Oh man. Yeah, Gold Commander. Hammer equals workers, sickle equals peasants. Interesting. Ilhan R says 10,000 years of human history. We never learn from it. Every civilization in history falls because of greed. Yet we as humans never outlaw greed. I think that's an important point. And then Katie says, don't forget the real letter writing campaign for the Orlando comrades to attend tomorrow. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Actually, I won't be there. I'll be doing a show live, and then I'm going to have one of the members on tomorrow to talk about it so that we can get the word out more. So I won't be there, but I'll be talking about it on Savvy and JB show on RBN. So just letting you know. But yeah, thanks, Katie. All right. So did anybody say anything else on? Yeah. All right. So I got to get going. I went overtime. I did not want to go overtime, but that's how it goes with me. I'm a talker. Sorry. But I'm so glad that the majority of you guys were able to stay. Just to let you guys know, I got some exciting things to talk about. Oh my goodness, some announcements. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to be continuing the reading of Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Devon Price. So if you guys have not, I will be continuing this book. We're almost done. I cannot wait to read the ending of this. We're going to get into it. Cannot wait. But as well, in addition to, and furthermore, I'm also going to be doing the reading continuing of The Will to Change, Men, Masculinity, and Love by Bell Hooks. I cannot wait to get into this. We're going to read more. We're going to get into this as well. And I got an announcement. I got a third book. You ready? All right. We're going to start the reading of The Water and the Spirit. Ritual, magic, and the initiation of the life of an African shaman. I cannot wait. It's going to be so good. I'm appealing to my inner Nigerian. Oh my goodness, it's going to be so good. Aren't you excited? I am very, very excited. This is right up my alley. This is Miledoma Patrice Some, author of The Healing Wisdom in Africa. I cannot wait. Oh, this is going to be so good. All right, everyone. How was my Nigerian accent? Was it pretty good? I'm literally like a third Nigerian, so I found that out when I actually did. Oh, this is looking so good. Oh, yes, it's like a shore. Look at that. This model, it looks good on me. Anyway, so yeah, I cannot wait. Anyway, so we're gonna go over those. Also, just to let you guys know, I'm also raising money for the mutual aid efforts here in Orlando. So if you guys would like to, you guys can donate to that from Orlando Mutual Aid. Where if you guys would like to donate via Cash App, you guys can do a $ Orlando RBN, and we're trying to raise money for grocery gift cards, toiletries, and warm clothes. So I cannot wait to do that. And also, just another huge shout out to the patrons on Patreon, Coffee, as well as anybody that's in the mutual aid do PayPal. It goes a very long way. So thank you so very much to all of you. Also, a very special happy birthday to Rome of RBN. Today is his birthday. So happy birthday to Rome. If you ever get to watch this, love you, brother. Nice to that you're turning. Wait, are you I think he's 31 or 32. He's somewhere around there. But happy birthday to you. Also, shout out to Sabby Sabs. Sabby, she has been sick over the weekend. She had the flu. I'm glad you're feeling better. Also, Nick and CJ from RBN was on Jimmy Dore show last night. So if you guys want to, you guys can go ahead and give that a look. But anywho, I cannot wait to, gosh, I'm hungry. I got to go eat. Anywho, thank you so very much for everybody for watching. I didn't have an ending. Wait, did I have something I was going to end with? I think so. I can't remember. Let me see. I know I had something I was going to end with. Something funny. I want to do something funny because why not? I had a funny thing I was going to end with. What was I going to end with? I can't remember. I should have had it ready. Why didn't I have it ready? But JB, it happens. But I know I had it. It's okay. I was going to end with with a video, but I'm just like, oh, here it is. Duh, it's right in front of me. All right. I just want to end with this because this is hilarious. I'm glad I found it. This is going to be so funny. Okay. So I know that the Iowa caucus was yesterday. And so a lot of people are probably like, oh man, people are thinking about presidential politics and stuff like that. But I just want to share this because I thought this was hilarious. Look, here's the thing. And this is not to be ageist at all, because there's a lot of older people who can do great things, right? And that's not my issue. My issue is with people like Joe Biden, who are clearly in cognitive decline, that he should not be in the levers of power. And so if they can make a joke like this about you, you should not be in the White House. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I honestly do think that Joe Biden is going to end up dropping out because of health issues. And then they're going to try to either give it to somebody like Gavin Newsom. They wouldn't try to give it to Kamala Harris because Kamala Harris is so unpopular. Kamala Harris is that substitute teacher that nobody likes, that whenever they see her, when the teacher is out, they're like, oh, God. Her again. She tries to be cool, but she's not. Anyway, so let's go and end with this. But like I always tell everybody, look, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. Smoke them if you got them, drink them if you got them. You ain't got them, then watch something funny. Because joy is revolutionary. Or read something, because reading is fundamental, right? We got to make sure that we keep ourselves well read, okay? And also, free Palestine. All right, I'm going to head out, guys. But thank you so very much for joining in. Oh, and forehead kisses to every single one of you, because you guys make this channel possible. And I will see you in the next one. So take care. Bye-bye.
At White House Senior Living, our residents feel right at home. Our vibrant facility offers delightful activities and outings, round-the-clock professional care, and exquisite house-made meals.
Well, I've been eating everything that's put in front of me. I've been eating all Italian foods, basically.
And ice cream.
And ice cream, chocolate chip ice cream.
White House Senior Living, where residents feel like presidents. At White House Senior Living, our residents feel right at home. Our vibrant facility offers delightful activities and outings, round-the-clock professional care, and exquisite house-made meals.
Well, I've been eating everything that's put in front of me. I've been eating all Italian foods, basically.
And ice cream.
And ice cream, chocolate chip ice cream.
White House Senior Living, where residents feel like presidents. At White House Senior Living,